I'm Eunice Lee, a pianist, composer, and educator. This concert, To Paris with Cédric Tiberghien, has something to do with a country so steeped in culture and history, France. The first piece is written by a French composer who tries to write himself into a lineage of distinguished French composers. The second is performed by a French pianist, Cédric Tiberghien. And the third was written when Mozart visited the country's capital, Paris. First off, we have Ravel's suite, Le Tombo de Cupaca. Titled as such, the suite instantly recalls the French Baroque composer, François Couperin. And by the 1910s, when Ravel was writing this music, Couperin was, of course, long dead. But that didn't matter, because that's what tombs are for, to contain the dead. But as you will hear later this week, a musical tomb goes further than that. It does not merely contain the dead, but reanimates it. So listen out for how Ravel's Tombo resurrects long-forgotten French Baroque dance forms, such as the rigodon and minuet. Meanwhile, the 1910s was a tumultuous period in Europe. Composed between 1914 and 1917, the composition's gestation overlaps entirely with the period of the First World War. And this perhaps helps us understand Ravel's obsession with tombs. Haunted by the many deaths and casualties around him, it wasn't just Couperin's corpse that was contained in the music. As Ravel indicates, each movement was written in memory of a friend he lost to the war. Yet, quite curiously, the music continues to be consistently light-hearted. When confronted with this criticism, Ravel responded simply, "The dead are sad enough in their eternal silence." So, why Couperin? Why Le Tombeau de Couperin, rather than, say, Le Tombeau de Bach? Because during the First World War, you see, France fought against Germany, which only worsened what was already a sour international relation. And alongside this military war was also a cultural battle, where each nation fought for the supremacy of its own tradition. And so the 1910s saw a heightened French musical nationalism, as composers began to write themselves into long lineages of great French composers, in an attempt to outdo their German counterparts. Witness, for instance, Debussy's homage to Chopin in his Douze Etudes of 1915, and in this case, Ravel's tribute to Couperin. Along with this was an attempt to create a uniquely French sound world, full of elegance, wit, reticence, and lightness, sounding against the perceived excesses and heaviness of German music. And while German music, such as Wagner's, were perhaps saying too much with their lush strings and declamatory brasses, Ravel's focus here was almost to say nothing. Thus, woodwinds are favored instead for their lightness of sound. And where strings are used, they're often muted or plucked. And where brasses are used, they're used only as coloristic dabs. So in the first movement, Prelude, listen out for how Ravel opens the piece with the melodious dovetailing of the oboe and clarinet, all set against the backdrop of an interesting timbre of muted plucked strings. It is as if Ravel was saying, "This is the distinct sound of France." And of course, The revival of French Baroque dance idioms here evoke a French aesthetic of elegance and wit. Listen out, for instance, to the third movement, Minuet, a graceful dance in triple time. Here, a beautiful woodwind solo is supported by quiet strings, evoking the lost world of shepherds and pastorals. The next piece is written by Mozart. One of his lesser-known works, the Piano Concerto No. 13 in C major, is said to be striking in the way it balances the learned and the popular. As Mozart himself said, this concerto is a happy medium between what is too easy and too difficult. There are passages here and there from which the connoisseurs alone can derive satisfaction. But these passages are written in such a way that the less learned cannot fail to be pleased, though without knowing why. To let you in on one of these learned secrets, as it were, listen out for the concerto's opening, where the orchestra's quiet, imitative music gives a silent nod to the cerebral contrapuntal style of Baroque masters. Yet even if the reference was lost on you, it doesn't really matter, because the music is still very pleasant sounding. Another interesting detail of the opening movement is the cadenza. Usually known as a section for the soloist to demonstrate their dexterity, most cadenzas are brimming with fast, virtuosic passages. However, what characterizes this cadenza instead is its lyricism. Indeed, this cadenza is more technically modest and leans towards sentimentality. Listen to this sentimental passage based on the secondary theme that lies at the cadenza's core. The last piece, the Symphony No. 31 in D major, is often referred to as the Paris Symphony. The first movement is characterized by loud scalic passages. Listen to the opening. The second movement, as one might expect, is in stark contrast to the first. Filled with lyrical passages, the second movement sounds leisurely and graceful. We then move on to the final and shortest movement. Listen out for the surprise Mozart sprang on his audiences back in the day as he opens with the violins playing softly, before following this with a loud forte. The musical joke wasn't lost on Mozart's audience, as Mozart exclaimed in a letter to his father that the audience got hush at the beginning when they heard the soft opening, but began clapping when they heard the forte sprung upon them. The rest of the movement is replete with such juxtapositions of soft and loud passages, with loud passages recalling the energy of the first movement. And this completes our musical journey to France. In this concert, we have the lyrical, the folk-like, the energetic, and the virtuosic, and more. You may, however, choose to add a pit stop to this journey by listening to the other version of the second movement that Mozart composed for the Paris Symphony. Enjoy!